You can spend thousands on your plugins, but it doesn't mean that your mix will sound great. That's because expensive plugins don't fix your mix. It's all about how well you understand the fundamentals. So take this lead for example. It's a little bit too loud, making the mix unbalanced. Listen in context. But if I turn the volume down, like this, it's turning the volume of the quietest part as well, so they're still disappearing in the mix. That's why you want to use a compressor, to duck just the loudest part of the sound and decrease the dynamic range, which is the difference between the quietest part and the loudest part, resulting in a more balanced sound. So, I will play this sound once with an expensive plugin and once with an Ableton stock plugin, and we will play a game called Tell the Difference, Pro Seed 2 versus Glue Compressor. So first play the sound without any processing, and then I will play it once with the expensive plugin and the cheapest plugin, and let's see if you can hear the difference. Can you tell the difference? The difference is really minor, and to be honest, when you're mixing, especially in the beginning, it's not about what tools you're using, it's all about how you're using them and why. So in this video, I want to show you how you can achieve a professional sounding mix using just stock plugins, free plugins, or cheaper alternatives. Because you all have the tools to do so. It's just about knowing what questions to ask yourself to achieve that professional and powerful sounding mix. Also, if you're a serious producer that wants to invest in your skills and really get to the core reason why your mix doesn't sound the way you imagined it, do click the link below. I help music producers go from being stuck with a mix that doesn't sound great to producing and releasing professional sounding music. And some of my clients even went on to play in clubs and festivals and even got music played on BBC radio. So first of all, what is a compressor? A compressor is a tool that can extract all the power from any sound by controlling the volume. Imagine that if you have a sound with a lot of peaks, like the one that we have here, these sounds will be a lot louder than these, and overall, things will not sound balanced. But if they're all close together, like the compressed version, you can increase the volume, and the sound becomes much more powerful. So just listen to this compared with the uncompressed version. There is a massive difference between the quietest part and the loudest part. So this is what a compressor is doing. When you have a sound that has crossed the threshold, you have an imaginary hand that is taking the volume fader down. Now, the attack is how quickly the volume fader goes down. The ratio is how far it's pulling the volume fader down. So a ratio of 2:1 will be a little pull, and a ratio of 10:1 will be a strong pull. The release is how long it takes for the hand to take the volume fader back down to 0. So in this case, I set up the compressor with a fairly quick attack because I wanted to start working after a couple of milliseconds. A moderate to quick release because I want the compressor to go back to 0 fairly quickly, but not too quickly, so we can flatten all of these peaks, cut them down. And I set up the ratio of 4:1 because we don't need an aggressive pull. I don't want this to be really squished. I just wanted to kind of like reduce this, and this in volume. And then you just set up the threshold. But you can notice that it's really quiet now. That's why you will add makeup gain. Without, with. Much more consistent because the sound is more consistent over time. But another reason that your mix isn't clean and loud is if you have a lot of harsh peaks, like on hi-hats. Take this hat for example. It sounds a little harsh and it has a big transient. Now, I find the problem that most producers have is that they can't identify what's wrong with their sound, so they also don't process them with intention. So to identify first of all what's wrong with your sound, you can grab any EQ plugin, make sure that the headphone feature is on, and then you just scan through it to listen to the specific bands until you find out if something sounds muddy or something sounds harsh. Like around here, sounds a little bit harsh. This sounds really nasty. Now I can go with EQ and do something like this. And start reducing all of the different peaks from the sound. But as you notice that you need to listen to each individual peak, set up the notch, find the right frequency, the annoying frequencies, and reduce it. And that is tedious and also taking a lot of time. There are some tools that can do the job for you, or at least speed this process up so you can actually focus on being creative and producing music instead of tedious and technical details as this. So you can spend $219. Hello, Hazel. How's it going? So you can spend $219 on Soothe 2, or you can spend $65 on Rezo. So, can you tell the difference? And this time, it's Soothe 2 versus Rezo. As usual, I'll play first the sound without any processing, and then I will play one plugin and then the other one, and you will tell me if you can hear the difference. So, can you hear the difference? This time, there is a minor difference, but which one is better? That's a question of style and it's up for debate. And I would love to hear in the comment which one you think sounds better. So this is how I set up both plugins. If you hear a little bit of noise in the background, it's because my cat is in the toilet behind me. So with Soothe 2, you will click on one of the bands and press listen, and then you can listen to the individual bands where you want the plugin to be more sensitive to. So I wanted to add a band here because of that ringing quality, but we can probably add another band here. Then just play with the depth. With hi-hats, I like to put the attack on 0, so it starts working straight away. And then click back on the listen, so you can listen to everything. Nice, sounding pretty good. Super quick workflow, but it does cost $219. So again, it's not for everyone. If you're a professional mixer and you're constantly mixing music for other people, then yeah, maybe it's worth getting this. But for most people, you can get away with a plugin called Rezo, and this is how I set this one up. You can think about this as like a little EQ notch that is emphasizing whatever frequency the plus is on. Listen to this. So we can create a dot here and continue. Now we found all of the problematic frequencies, so click on this button again. Let's highlight all of them. If you press on Control, you can turn them all down or up. And if you slide with 2 fingers on your trackpad or on a wheelie on your mouse, if you have that instead, you can make the cue wider or narrower. So now we went from this to this. Now the advantage of using this plugin is that it costs $65 compared to $219 of the Soothe, and that you have much more control over which frequencies you want to attenuate. But sometimes these tools won't be enough, and you will still have some sharp transients poking through the speakers or through the headphones, whatever you're listening with. In that case, you want to use a free plugin called Crispy Clip Lite. It's basically a soft clipper which just cuts the transients. So So why use this instead of a compressor? Because compressor not always working quickly enough to actually reduce the volume of the very beginning of your sound, the very initial part of the transient. This always does. Now, one question that I get asked quite often is how to make your sound brighter and fuller. One way is to add another layer, but that's not always the right answer. Saturation is probably the way you want to go. But if you want to have more precise control over the sound, then you need to use multiband saturation. Okay, what are you talking about? So I have here this sound. It kind of disappears in the mix when you listen to it in context. So, can you hear the difference in this time Saturn versus Raw? So, could you hear the difference? I couldn't. So this is how I set up the plugins. Let's start with Saturn. So first of all, I actually reduced all the frequencies from 170 Hz and below because they didn't add anything to the sound and they kind of interfered with the kick and bass, which are on the low frequencies. I wanted to have more space for those type of elements. Sounds kind of muddy, doesn't really add anything, so I just took the volume down. Then I split the mids. So in this case I used the dynamic knob to compress the sound a little bit, making the quieter sounds closer to the louder sounds, so they sound more consistent over time. And added a little bit of drive. Just sounds a bit fuller. And with the highs I did something very similar. All together, sounding so much powerful. Now, you can do basically the same thing with Raw. So the way I set this up is just turning off the low frequencies, this time from 200 Hz and below. So the low, we have low, mids and highs, and the low, which is the orange, is starting at 200 Hz. So just turn them off. On the mids, I added about a little bit of drive. Adding a little bit of body to the sound, and then doing the same thing with the highs. Let's add the highs before and after. Amazing. And both plugins work exceptionally well. Now, sometimes you can't understand why you have some muddiness in your mix, and it's just impossible to tell why. Does that ever happen to you? So usually it happens when you have some clashing frequencies. So the best way to deal with that, and the easiest thing by far, is doing a smart sidechain. So I want to take all of these leads and duck them a little bit when my kick is playing. So my kick and my claps are the most important elements of this track. And the leads are masking them. So you can use Soothe 2 again to duck just the frequencies of the kick from these leads. So whenever the lead is playing, there's a little hole carved for the kick and clap. The way to do that is turn the sidechain on, set this up from the kick, and we can set the frequencies here, add a little bit of depth. Notice the kick. Every time the kick is playing, all the frequencies from the leads are being attenuated. Okay, that's one option, but this costs $219. It's quite a lot. And you can do the same thing with another plugin that costs $65. That's much more affordable for most people. So again, attack on 1. Let's keep the release as it is. And we will set the input from the kick as well. And let's create a band here. And let's move it around. And you will start noticing the exact same thing happening. This plugin even tells you in red lines where are the problematic frequencies. Where does the kick clash with the leads? Sounds so much cleaner. So, I hope you learned something cool in this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.